For most of human history, the moon was defined by certainty. It rose and fell in the sky with predictable rhythm. It reflected sunlight without producing any of its own. It showed the same face, night after night, as if fixed in a permanent state of indifference. Philosophers, astronomers, and poets argued over its meaning, but not its nature. The moon was dry, empty, finished. Even when technology advanced enough to resolve its surface in detail, that certainty remained intact. Craters piled atop craters. Dust lay undisturbed. There were no signs of erosion, no rivers, no clouds. The moon appeared to be a fossil, an object preserved in a vacuum, unchanged since its violent formation. When humans finally reached it, the verdict seemed confirmed. Astronauts walked on powdery soil, planted flags, collected rocks, and left. Nothing followed them. No life stirred. No hidden reservoirs revealed themselves. The moon was magnificent, but inert. Exploration ended not with mystery, but with closure. That closure was premature, because the moon's surface tells different stories depending on where one looks. While equatorial regions endure extreme cycles of heat and cold, the poles occupy a rare geometric alignment. There, the sun never climbs high in the sky. Shadows stretch and overlap. Certain craters, deep, steep, and perfectly oriented, never receive sunlight at all. Not once. Not for billions of years. Inside these permanently shadowed regions, the moon behaves unlike anywhere else in the inner solar system. Temperatures fall below -200 degrees Celsius. Heat delivered by impacts or nearby sunlit terrain cannot penetrate deeply. At these temperatures, molecular motion nearly stops. Volatile substances that would vanish elsewhere become fixed in place. In these shadows, time loses its erasing power. Over immense spans, water molecules delivered by comets, asteroids, and solar wind accumulated quietly. They did not melt. They did not flow. They did not evaporate. They adhered to dust grains, lodged between rocks, and settled into the regolith. Layer by layer, impact by impact, the moon's poles became repositories of one of the most valuable substances in space. Water did not survive on the moon because the moon is alive. It survived because the moon is dead. That paradox defines its importance. Water is not merely a survival requirement. It is an enabling substance. It supports chemistry, buffers temperature, stores energy, and allows systems to loop instead of collapse. On Earth, water is abundant enough to be invisible. In space, it is transformational. Without local water, human presence beyond Earth is temporary by design. Missions are planned around strict limits. Every liter is rationed. Every failure threatens immediate return. With water, those constraints soften. Not disappear, but shift. The moon's polar ice does not offer abundance. It offers optionality. Water can be purified and consumed. It can be split into oxygen and hydrogen. Oxygen becomes breathable air. Hydrogen becomes fuel. Combined again, they power engines capable of lifting payloads off the lunar surface and into deep space. Stored as ice or liquid, water becomes radiation shielding, protecting crews from cosmic rays and solar storms. One substance, many functions. This is why the moon's ice matters more than nearly any other resource beyond Earth. Not because it is plentiful, but because it sits in the right place. The moon's gravity is weak. Launching material from its surface requires far less energy than launching from Earth. Every kilogram extracted there multiplies its usefulness once freed from gravity's hold. The moon becomes not a place to reach, but a place to depart from. This redefines what a space colony actually means. A lunar colony would not resemble terrestrial settlements. There would be no expansion into surrounding land, no agriculture under open skies, no casual movement. Every structure would be sealed. Every system would be deliberate. Every resource would be monitored constantly. Colonies near the lunar poles would cluster around narrow regions where sunlight grazes crater rims. These areas, sometimes called peaks of eternal light, receive near-continuous illumination, while shadow lies only meters away. Power generation would depend on this fragile geometry. A few degrees of misalignment could mean darkness lasting weeks. Living here would mean living on margins. Margins of temperature, margins of energy, margins of error. Human psychology evolved in abundance of cues: wind, sound, color, motion. The moon offers none of these. Silence is absolute. The sky is black even at noon. Earth hangs motionless overhead. Time becomes abstract. Days last weeks. Nights stretch endlessly. Sustaining human minds here would be as difficult as sustaining bodies. And yet, if humanity can learn to live here, it can live anywhere. Because the moon removes illusion. There is no sense of infinite space, no belief that mistakes will be absorbed. Every action leaves a mark. Every excavation alters thermal balance. Every exhaust plume deposits material that will never be washed away. The polar ice is especially unforgiving. Extracting it requires heat. Heat destabilizes the very conditions that preserve ice. Too much disturbance, and water sublimates directly into vapor, escaping lunar gravity forever. Mining infrastructure must be precise beyond precedent. Errors cannot be scaled back. Once a cold trap warms, it stops being a cold trap. The moon does not replenish. This makes the ice not just a resource, but a responsibility. Who decides how much is extracted? At what rate? For what purpose? The moon belongs to no nation, yet access to its water could define dominance in space. Infrastructure built first will shape access later. Scarcity turns neutrality into tension, but treaties and agreements are secondary to physics. The moon enforces consequences regardless of intent. There is also the question of legacy. The ice has waited billions of years untouched. Once used, it cannot be restored. The decision to mine lunar ice commits humanity to a permanent change in the moon's environment. That change will outlast civilizations. It will be visible long after records are lost. This is the first time humanity has encountered a resource whose extraction alters an entire world before settlement even begins. The moon offers no distractions, no ecosystems to argue over, no ambiguity about damage. What is lost is lost. What remains is visible forever. This clarity is uncomfortable, but necessary. If lunar colonies succeed, they will succeed because they are small, slow, and intentional. Growth will be measured in systems perfected, not territory claimed. Expansion will be vertical, efficiency, resilience, redundancy, not horizontal. If they fail, the failure will not be dramatic. It will be quiet. Systems will degrade. Water will leak. Power will falter. Habitats will be sealed and abandoned. The moon will not reclaim them. They will remain as artifacts of ambition unbalanced by restraint. The polar ice does not promise survival. It promises a test of whether humanity can operate under absolute constraint without reverting to exploitation. A test of whether technology can be paired with ethics. A test of whether expansion can be decoupled from consumption. The moon has waded through planetary formation, asteroid bombardment, and the rise of intelligence on Earth. It is indifferent to timelines. It does not care whether humanity succeeds or fails, but it will remember. The craters will remain dark or grow warmer. The ice will persist or vanish. The record will be unambiguous. The question is not whether the moon's polar ice can support future space colonies. The question is whether humanity can approach its first off-world resource with enough patience to deserve a second. Because the moon does not forgive. It only endures. And whatever we choose to do in its shadows will echo across every world we ever hope to reach.